Welcome back to episode 6.
Ooh, that was like a proper intro.
It was, well, I mean, it was half a proper intro. I'm trying to be more professional.
It's not going to work, mate. You can't
No.
pull it off.
So every time we'll just start the podcast with, all right?
All right.
All right? Hey, or like, how's it going? I noticed when I was editing, we recorded 2 episodes in one day. And in the second episode, I opened it by saying, how's it going? But I already knew how it was going because we've been talking for the past 2 hours recording podcast episodes.
Yeah, did I not point that out in the episode?
Oh, did you?
I'm pretty sure I made a joke. I took the piss out of you
Oh,
for
yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
I hope
Fair.
I did. If not, I let myself down.
Okay, well, maybe.
That was a while ago for us, but for some of our listeners, they may have only recently listened to episode 2. So
Yeah.
it might be fresh in their memory. So that, you might know if you're listening whether I took the piss out of Jamie or not. I hope
You'll
I
know
did.
send better emails better than we do.
Yeah, that's not hard, is it?
No. We've just recorded the trailer as well, which is a bit cringe. I hate doing scripted stuff.
Yeah, as you can tell, this is not a scripted podcast, so having to read from something was challenging for both of us, but I think we did all right. Luckily, it was only 2 lines each.
Yeah, but take a look at the trailer if you haven't already, and feel free to troll me in the comments based on my scripted delivery.
I think you did a fine job.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.
For someone who can't read, you did really well.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm actually super hungry. It's just before lunch as well, and I'm just trying to do this like health kick just before, because I've spent Christmas and New Year's in Thailand, which I keep telling everyone. It's almost like when you went traveling around Southeast Asia for 6 months, 2 weeks after starting an agency with me.
Yeah.
And then the following 6 months, you just wouldn't stop talking about Southeast Asia and traveling around it. Like
You've got to talk about it. And not only that, but you've got to wear things that prompt conversation about your trip as well. So like bracelets, maybe an Asian beer t-shirt.
Yeah.
You've got to wear things that people go, oh, is that a Thai beer? And then you go, oh yeah. It's funny you mentioned Thailand because I went.
Yeah. I'm just glad you took that braid out of your hair.
Yeah.
After just a few weeks in coming back.
It wasn't my head hair either.
No.
Anyway,
Yes.
I'm also hungry. Are you fasting or are you just...
No, I'm not fasting. I'm just always hungry.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. So when the first week I got back, which was last week, I was doing this thing where I thought I needed to detox because I just ate and drank everything in Asia, in Thailand. And so I was having these smoothies, and it was like ginger, coriander, spinach, lime, banana, apple.
Oh, so many superfoods.
I know. I've actually stopped those now because they're super high calorie. It's like 300 calories for a smoothie.
Oh, really?
It's like no one told me.
This is how they get you, man.
I know. And I'm thanks to your girlfriend, I'm also trying out kefir at the moment as well, if that's how you pronounce it.
Good for your gut.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's low calorie, but it's doing some good stuff, apparently.
Nah, it's not that bad. I'm just 100 mil, 150 mil necking that and just trusting that it's doing something in my gut.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there should be evidence of good gut health, without meaning to get too crude. You should be able to tell whether it's making a difference.
But like straight away, or is it something you've got to
Well, I
build
don't
up?
know it depends on your body's timeline, I guess. Its
Yeah.
processing speed. If it's
there's
anything like
any-
my internet, it will take quite a while.
Yeah. If there's any kefir, live, cultures, fermented food experts out there that can shed some light on this, that'd be great. Anyway, episode 6. I think you released a spoiler in the last episode about what this is going to be about. So I'm not going to ask you what we're going to talk about today. It's subject lines.
Yeah.
Subject lines is one of those things that is quite a well-covered subject when it comes to email marketing. Right.
Really well covered. I think it's the thing that we get asked about. I'd say that and send frequency are the two most common questions.
Yeah, I thought you were going to put yourself in a hole then because you said before in a previous episode that send frequency is the most common question.
There you
I
go.
was going to call you out on bullshit, but you rescued yourself.
Yeah. It's you.
So subject lines then. I guess what the obvious questions are: what makes a good one? What makes a bad one? What impact does having a good or bad subject line have? Which one of those questions do you want to talk about first?
I actually want to do quintessentially James thing and not acknowledge any of those questions. I think my internet went for a second, but it seems to be back now. I actually want to do a quintessentially James thing and not come back to any of those questions first and foremost. Because the first thing I want to say, Jamie, is for anyone listening, subject lines are a really easy thing to obsess over because they're super short. They are the first thing that people see. And I think as email users, we all care about subject lines to a certain extent. Even if you're not an email marketer, you might quietly appreciate a good subject line or get pissed off, perhaps not so quietly, by a terrible subject line. So everyone has an opinion on subject lines. They're the public-facing part of email marketing. And I want to stress that just by sending emails, you're already, if you just could do that consistently, you're already winning. You're already in that top 5%. And so, like everything that we talk about on this podcast, try not to obsess about subject lines too much. If you're sending good stuff in your emails, the subject line should be quite a natural and easy process. It shouldn't be something that you spend any longer than 5 or 10 minutes over. And yes, obviously, everyone talks about, everyone has this perception that they're super important. If you have a strong sender reputation, if people know you for sending good stuff, you can get away with murder in your subject lines.
Nice. Okay, I like that. I particularly like the part about writing it last. So write your email first, then write your subject line, because then it will seem intuitive what it should be.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those things that if you think about too much, the worse it is as well.
Yes, definitely.
Because there is a science behind subject lines. There is a science that, a lot of the experts will talk about and will be advertised on platforms, websites, whether that's HubSpot, MailChimp, Beehive, MailerLite, Brevo, any of those. They'll all have advice on what subject lines are. And a lot of them now will have live tips as you're writing your subject line that will tell you how good it is. And some of them will have AI tools that will write the subject line for you based on the content of your email. I'm really, what's the word here? I don't believe that those tools are very helpful.
Agreed.
And sometimes it's easy to just say what is a hipster opinion just to appear hipster. Like some people who like to say email marketing is dead, for example. But actually, I don't think those things are that helpful. I'm a little bit dubious of the advice that you see on those things. But they are based on data. But I do think we can do better. And I do think that there is an approach to subject lines which is less technical and more emotion driven.
Yes.
And so why don't we talk about first the importance of a subject line, right? Because I will write my email, and this is something I think we spoke about in a previous episode. I'll write my email and I'll write my subject line, and the context of which my subject line is being written is the way where I'm viewing it in the email platform, in the field that says subject line. But the way everyone else views your subject line is within their inbox among dozens, hundreds of other emails. So why in the context of an inbox is the subject line so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of your easiest opportunities to stand out. And I think particularly it's good and important for those recipients who don't open every email from you. There will be on any email list a demographic of recipients who unconditionally will open every email that you send because they trust you as a sender and they expect that what they get will be worth their time. So they will open your email. Then there will be those who don't open any emails you send for whatever reason. And then there'll be that middle demographic, which I would say probably constitutes the majority, which are those who might open your email depending on what you're saying in the subject line. And when we talk, I mean, we're going to talk in unison in this podcast, Jamie, about why subject lines aren't necessarily the most important thing, but also how they can move the needle. And the instances in which they move the needle most significantly are the instances where they've won over that middle demographic, that demographic who will sometimes, the swing voters of your email list, the ones who will occasionally open your emails, but you have to really win them over to do so. So it's important to stress that really what we want to do as email marketers is increase the size of that first demographic who will open our emails unconditionally. And when we look at the reasons why someone might open an email, we find that actually the sender name is the most important of the 3 public-facing elements of an email that you see before you open it, which is the sender name, the subject line, and the preview text. The preview text is the least important, and the subject line is in the middle of those 2 as far as importance goes. So if you have that strong reputation, if people know what they're going to expect, then it doesn't really matter what your subject line's saying. If you can increase the size of that demographic of people who really want to open your emails regardless, you can leave the subject line blank and you're still going to get those opens. So in an ideal world, 100% of our list fall into that category. Of course, that's never going to be the case. So then the question becomes, well, how do we win over that middle demographic, the ones that maybe will or maybe won't? And that's where the subject line really comes into its own.
Okay, nice. So if we're thinking about subject lines, because often the metric that gets tied to a good subject line is a high open rate.
Yeah.
And so you said there's a few other things that are perhaps, well, there's one thing that's more important than the subject line, and that's the from name.
Yeah.
And it's probably worth stressing that if you want to positively impact your opens on a consistent long-term basis, that the reputation for sending good emails is more important than anything gimmicky like a good subject line.
Yeah.
Right. So, that a subject line is one lever that you can pull. And obviously it's incredibly short-term because writing a good subject line will help impact one campaign. And then you have to come up with a good subject line for every single campaign for that to be something that's consistent, and that can be tricky. But it's much better to work on more fundamental things if you want to impact your open rate in a positive way. That's a subject that again deserves its own episode and might have its own episode. I think we even talked about open rates in a previous episode. I think in one of the episodes. So if you want to see more about or listen more about open rates, go back to that. I said that the advice that we see from mainstream email marketing services, platforms, etc., the advice that we get about subject lines, I don't believe in. I just want to expand on that a little bit, because we need to think about the subject line, like I said, in the context of the inbox view. And sometimes the best performing subject lines are those that go against best practice. And you alluded to an example there. You could leave the subject line blank, right? As if you had a high percentage of your list that would just open your emails no matter what, because they trust you and they believe that the content's always good. So doing something a little bit different sometimes is better, because if everyone is following the kind of prescribed advice, then no one is different.
Yeah.
And so if we think about that a little bit, we want to be different, but we also need to pull on some psychological triggers as well. And there's some copywriting basics here, which is, attention, intrigue, desire, and I can't remember the other ones. But there are some psychological triggers that we want to pull here. So if we're trying to be different, we also want to think about how we can grab attention and generate enough kind of curiosity and intrigue to get people to open the email as well.
Yeah, agreed. And, I think what you've touched on there is probably the biggest takeaway of this episode. I know it's last episode we didn't do our hot takes at the end, James. I don't know whether you've abandoned that format or not.
No, that format is still live and kicking. I've just completely forgot.
To be fair, what hot takes can one say about first-party data? Maybe subject lines are a bit more conducive to a hot take, but yeah, I think without meaning to give too much away, I think probably the biggest takeaway here is that variety is the spice of life when it comes to subject lines. And so, as you say, we can reject all convention and all conventional wisdom when it comes to how our subject lines ought to read, what sort of elements we might want to include, the length of them. All of those things can be chucked in a bin so long as we have variety. And I think you're absolutely right to say that. And that is variety both in terms of the context of the inbox, i.e. does our subject line look different to everyone else's subject lines? If we're sending emails around Christmas, maybe we don't use a snowman emoji, maybe we use a palm tree emoji. And what impact might that have? Because everyone else is using snowman emojis, we're suddenly going to stick out in the inbox. But it's also variety with the other subject lines we send. And I would say this is less important because there is a false belief that people sort of track these things. Recipients notice whether you're using emojis in some subject lines and not others. But I still think, for example, 1 week sending a subject line that is composed of one word and the other including a whole sentence will move the needle for you. If you send a long sentence every week, it's not going to move the needle. So for the sake of your own metrics, including variety is really, really important. But Jamie, there are objective things that we've learned through sending that, and I do feel as though people listening to this don't necessarily want to just hear these sort of fundamental truths. They want to know, okay, how many emojis can I include in my subject line though? And they want to know, do capital letters work, and those sorts of things. And so we can delve into that too if you think now is a good time to do so.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, let's do, maybe we could do like myth busting stroke myth verification segment here, where it's things that is the advice that is normally given and whether we believe that it's good or not. I mean, I guess the first one is emojis and subject lines. Are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing? Can they be both good and bad?
Yes. So everything said here is very brand dependent, and let it be known that if you're not the sort of brand that would ever include an emoji, maybe you ought to be, and maybe that's a brand question, but be consistent with who you are, but also don't be afraid to sort of push the envelope a little bit when it comes to what's considered normal for your brand. Email is unique in that you are not necessarily projecting this to the public. You have a list that's opted in to hear from you, and therefore that affords different brand guidelines perhaps. Emojis, yes, using them at the start of your subject line does more often than not lead to a higher open rate. I would limit my emoji use to one at the start and one at the end, or just one at the start. I wouldn't use more than two unless it was for stylistic reasons. I was saying a sentence only through the use of emojis or something. What are your thoughts, Jamie?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think that there is such thing as too much of a good thing can be bad when it comes to emojis. However, we did say if you want to do something different, if you want to do something different, then maybe that does mean putting loads of emojis in because no one else is doing that. So I like how you started that little piece on emojis there with your classic kind of MP caveat statement of it depends.
Yeah.
But there are, for me, emojis, yes, they're a good thing. But again, variety is good as well, right? So I think it's just being a bit more clever about your subject lines and stuff. Okay, another one is, I think the recommended length for a subject line is somewhere between 6 and 8 words or something, right?
Yeah, about 35 to 50 characters.
What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think the reason why that rule exists is because that is what's visible on various devices and email servers. So if you receive an email from Gmail and you see the preview on your phone, it will give you about within that range of subject lines, so that anything beyond that you get the dreaded 3 dots.
Yeah,
obviously on a desktop format you can see more of the subject line, but the guidance is, okay, stick within that, because otherwise you're risking the possibility of your subject line not being seen. I actually think that in and of itself can be used as a tool. And Jamie, you mentioned creating intrigue. Well, that 3 dots is sort of the intrigue punctuation, isn't it? And so if you are if the first 50 characters is tantalizing enough, then actually that cutoff might serve you rather than punish you.
Yeah.
Again, I come back to variety here. If we want to be frame breaking, if we want to jolt people into noticing us, that might mean a much shorter subject line, or it might mean a almost comically elaborative subject line. And both of those will help to distinguish you in the inbox, which is never a bad thing.
Agreed. Whilst you were talking there, I opened my phone to look at an email that I had. And my Gmail app has given me, it says I've got 2 emails. One of them has an emoji, and that emoji is delivered into my notifications thing on my phone, right? So that's nice. But one of them has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, and most of those words are quite short. And the other one has 1, 2, 3 words in. Interestingly, the one with 3 words only fits in 3 words because the from name is much longer than the other one. And the from name is taking up space there. So, but when it comes to length for me of subject line, I think that recommendation of 6 to 8 words or 35 to 50 characters, for me, that's a maximum, and that no one should ever feel like they have to fill that maximum.
Absolutely.
I think that would be my takeaway from that on subject line length.
Yeah, that's nice. Like most areas of copywriting, if you can say it faster, then do.
Yeah. I've had an idea for an episode. Maybe one of the next ones will be newsletter length that we can talk about.
Nice.
Okay, so what's another kind of thing about subject lines? You said about capital letters there, or capitalizing words.
Yeah,
capitalizing the whole subject line. What is your thinking around that?
Yeah, it works. Again, it's another capitalizing some words can also really help. I think this is actually more brand dependent than emojis. There are very few brands that I think should completely steer clear of emojis, because emojis are sort of a language in and of themselves. Capitalized words, however, is a little bit more cringe in my opinion. I think it's a little bit more bold, and it can sound off brand if you're all of a sudden like sale now on all in capital letters. That can be jarring if you're a luxury brand, for example. So
yeah,
but capitalizing words, again, scientifically there is evidence to suggest that capitalizing words, again, towards the start of the subject line rather than the end, can move the needle.
Yeah.
Do you want me to continue with other things that might?
So I think for my, just quickly on that capital thing, I think we do have to be careful there whether by capitalizing certain words, one, it can send signals that it's a spam message. So, using words like free or sale and capitalizing those can just identify it from a email platform point of view as spam, but also in the mind of the receiver. So I think if we're going to capitalize words, it needs to be the right words as well.
Yeah.
I think is the one thing that I would say.
Definitely, that's a great point. And it's worth remembering that, whenever we are conducting experiments, we're always wanting to give it plenty of time. So it might be, for example, that you listen to this podcast and you think, the next subject line I write, I'm going to capitalize the first or second word. And you do that, and you do see an uptick in open rates, and you're like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I should be doing this every subject line. The problem, of course, then comes back to variety. Perhaps the reason why you saw that initial increase is because you don't usually do that. And so whenever we test at the Inbox Club, we always have that in mind. We can't just use a one email sample size here. We have to run this for a while and do this now and again when we feel it's necessary or when it suits the subject line. And we build a tapestry of results off the back of that. Sometimes this won't be as impactful, and certainly if you're doing it every time you send an email, it's going to quickly lose its impact. So bear that in mind as well.
Yeah, perfect. And there are other variables as well that you need to be careful of as well, right? So if you're going to test something, you've got to make sure, testing is not a whole nother episode.
Yeah,
but if we want to test the subject line, we want to be careful that we're perhaps sending on the same day, same time as well.
Yeah.
We need to be control the variables, just like GCSE science. when we're testing and doing experiments there. I cut across you, and you were going to expand on some other things, James.
No, all good. No, thank you for doing that. No, all I was going to say was I wanted to talk about AI and subject line generation, which, as you said at the start of the episode, is becoming super popular.
Yeah,
basically every platform will offer it now, sort of native to their platform. I completely agree that it is not great, and I think that the main reason for that is that obviously generative AI is built to create relatively generic stuff. It's borrowing data that already exists, and so they're boring. I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. What I do want to say, however, is that there is evidence to suggest, and this comes not from us but from a guy called Jay Schwedelson, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who is an email marketing guru, I suppose, for want of a better word. He talks about the idea of using non-AI formats in order to, again, distinguish yourself in the inbox. So what he means by this is writing something that AI would never write, which on the surface sounds quite hard, but the suggestion is to create a subject line that doesn't make grammatical sense. So starting it with the word and or but is one way of doing this. So you might say, for example, and this is why we need better SEO. It doesn't make sense as a standalone, but it's still sort of, as a subject line, it still works. Or, but here's the problem with AI, it's something like that. So starting with but or and, AI would never produce that because it doesn't make sense, but it still makes sense to actual human beings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, nice. And all great things start with a but.
Hey.
I like that. I mean, I was listening to a talk last year at a kind of mini AI conference. Some guy was saying that, there was lots of learnings there about how to use AI. And obviously, that was a year ago. So a lot of the stuff that was spoken about there will perhaps even be irrelevant now because of how fast it's progressing. But one thing this guy was speaking about was talking about why we shouldn't be afraid of AI. And I think what he was speaking about there is similar to what you were just speaking about, which is that humans still have the power of the unpredictable. So, and so that's something that we need to kind of use, in our subject lines, is that power of the unpredictable. And that's what you were talking about there with that example from the guy's name that I'm not going to try and pronounce live on air. But it's that power of the unpredictable. It's the power of, and we've been pushing ourselves to do that, to be unpredictable and to be different. And before, our competition was other human beings, but now our competition is other human beings and AI, and how we can be unpredictable and different to both of those beings. Called AI a being, is that right?
I think that's the way it's going, to be fair.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, look at that simultaneous
Yeah,
you're going to hate that in the editing. That's the last thing you want.
Yeah,
both us doing one at the same time.
You just got double sorry about that.
One piece of testing that we've done recently for clients, which I love, and the results, I love it because whenever you do a test, what you're really hoping for is that the results are going to be really obvious and stark, and often you're disappointed because there isn't actually that much difference. In all of the subject line testing we've done using this hypothesis, we've seen big differences. So this is a good one, I think. I think listeners can start to use this tomorrow, and they'll hopefully see an uptick. It's using a statement over a question is significantly better for open rates, which isn't necessarily intuitive, Jamie. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think a lot of people, when they're sitting down to write a subject line, are tempted to write it in the form of a question. So they might say things like, what are the top trends for 2025? ? Or is your marketing ready for this, new update ? Or whatever.
Yeah.
The evidence that we've gathered is that you can impact open rates by as much as 30%. And I don't mean your open rate used to be 10% and now it's 40%. I mean, it used to be 18% and now it's 24%, for
That's
example.
good maths. That's good maths. Hold on.
Yeah, thanks. That was on the spot maths. You don't want to back yourself into that corner.
No,
So I
did.
got lucky there. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
But 30% increase. If you take your question and phrase it as a statement. So rather than saying, what are the top trends for 2025 ? Say instead, here are the top trends for 2025. Or rather than saying, are you ready for this new update? Say, here's how to get ready for this new update. And by doing that, full stop at the end if you want, or an emoji, whatever takes your fancy. But by doing that, big increase in open rates.
Nice. I like that.
That's
like
quite
that.
tasty, isn't it?
It is. I do like that. Okay, should we do a hot... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say there is one exception, and here's my final sort of actionable tip here.
Yeah.
Comparisons. So comparison statements or questions on subject lines are really good. So these can be phrased as both a statement and a question. But if you're saying something like, how do you match up? Or are you in the 9%? Those are the examples I've got scribbled down here. I didn't come up with those off the top of my head.
Okay.
People have this real compulsion to open an email that they feel will sort of put them in a minority or that might compare them to others. Or you might say, as a statement, you might say 88% of marketers are doing this. And that sort of intrigue that opens is also proving to be very popular with recipients that we're emailing.
Right. That's tasty. And it's so close to lunch.
Juicy. Yeah. You're hungry now?
Yeah.
If you weren't before, you're hungry now.
No, I was hungry before. I'm hungry now.
But now, ravenous.
Ravenous, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, should we do hot take quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Since we forgot in the last episode. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, my hot take is mix it up, have variety in your subject lines, and you'll be doing way better than everyone else.
Nice. Let's think about my hot take is, I guess, similar to James's. I think try and be different and try and be unpredictable. I'm going to keep it short.
Okay, you just copied mine, but that's fine.
Well, yeah, I mean, yours is variety and mine's different. I guess they're kind of similar. Be unpredictable. Let's say that.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
I copied your homework.
That's fine. You should open a thesaurus and looked at variety and then just read
What
some of
else
the
is
words
there?
underneath.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's fine. Well, that's when we're both in sync like that. It really, that really drives home the message. So that's good. If people come away from this thinking I need to really think about this and be a bit different, then we've done our job.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I like one time we'll do that thing where we said the hot take in unison again.
Yeah, I hated that, but
You
yeah,
didn't
it was
like that,
good.
did you?
I mean, it was good because it worked that time.
Yeah, we don't want to push our luck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you in the quick math situation. We don't want to back ourselves into a corner we can't get out of.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, nice. All right, what should people look forward to in the next episode?
Oh,
I'll put you on the spot because
you mentioned newsletter length in this episode.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's my get out of jail free card here, and I'm going to use that. Let's do newsletter length, shall we?
Okay, and write a subject line for our next episode on newsletter length.
Size doesn't matter, or does it?
Okay. Yeah, that's a question.
Well, size doesn't matter as a statement, and then in brackets, or does it? I'm combining both.
Okay, fine. I'm going to use the comparative one. How do you measure up?
Okay.
Or, no, that's shit. Does your newsletter measure up?
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Workshop that, mate. Workshop that. It's on the spot subject lines are
it's hard, isn't it?
similar to the public maps.
And we said that you should write the content before you write the subject line.
Yeah,
maybe,
exactly.
Actually, mine's just a ruler emoji.
Tell you what we can do at the end of next podcast, we can then do the subject line.
Okay.
For the email that we would have written about it.
Maybe the hot take in the next episode can be in the subject line form.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, or something like that. I don't know.
All right. We'll have forgotten that by the time it gets around to recording.
Yeah.
But
we completely forgot to do the hot take in the last one. So
exactly.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening.
All right, mate. Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Not you. I was talking to the listeners. Thanks for joining in, and thanks to the listeners for listening.
Yeah, no worries. Cheers.
Oh, no, yeah. Bye.
Okay, bye.